people like that need to be managed.
Yes, this is where I was going.
Yeah.
Bowden himself said, he said a lot of very perceptive remarks that related to himself. Geniuses are like special needs, but the other way round.
Yeah.
He said that nature is fair in its unfairness, in that people that have amazing, fantastic qualities that make them supermen in one area of life are often completely hopeless at everyday tasks. And he said that in the Q&A after his Punch and Judy discussion, it might have been.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, he must have understood he was talking about himself. He was talking about himself, and he must have known he was talking about himself.
Yeah, we have that as a short on this YouTube channel, actually.
Yes.
It was such a good... And it is. It's almost like he's looking into the camera a little bit. The fact that he's dead makes some of his words quite ironic, because he was... If you understand the man a bit... there's certain things that everyone will say that we know is true about Bowden and the way that he behaved and the way he seemed to think. And if you understand a bit about him and you listen to his speeches now, some of it is, a little bit on the nose in terms of himself as well. But I think that especially his, he says that it's not often recognised in its time. It's usually recognised after it's dead, which really just...
They're uncooperative people. They're difficult people. I mean, he must have known that he must have been self-aware enough, I think, to understand that there was a degree to which he was talking about himself. And that is true. And so, as a consequence, these kinds of people need management. They need the kind of person who is organised, who is interested in money, who has a very different skill set from them. In order to help them out and in order to allow them to reach their full potential. And maybe if he didn't really have that, he had that to some extent. He had people that would drive him to and from places because he couldn't drive, or let him stay at their place when he had a breakdown or whatever. But he didn't have someone who really saw the potential and thought he was great.
There was no SS for him, basically.
Well, not the SS, but there were certain figures within Germany that recognised Hitler's potential and kind of moulded him. So, but I think by the end of his life, there was a degree to which maybe he was getting that, and there were people in America like Greg Johnson or Jared Taylor that recognised him and started thinking to themselves, "Oh, if we could just get this guy kitted out with a proper studio and he could be kind of managed and given a salary somehow." So there's that. Now, of course, he was a pathological liar, so he would be very difficult to work with. And so you'd really have to bend over backwards, I imagine, to work with him. So you raised an interesting question, which one of you was that said it. Would he be, is it not perhaps likely that had he lived, then... And had he become more prominent because of the internet, then all kinds of peculiar things would have come out. He would have behaved oddly. There would have been things that would have gone wrong.
Yes, I think he would have. He would have destroyed his own legacy.
You don't want to have unlimited 24-hour access to Jonathan Bowden.
No,
he's a bit much for that. And we see it with quote unquote e-celebrities all the time. He might have ended up as an almost like a destiny figure. He becomes like a joke. And I think the internet is very good at making these kind of people into a joke.
Yeah, it's better...
Or Nick Fuentes.
It's better that he be a genuine tragedy as opposed to some sort of sad living clown.
Yeah.
That's very well. It's extremely well put. Yeah, that's a level of perspicacity that Bowden himself could rival. Yeah, that's exactly it. But better that he's a dead tragedy than a living clown, precisely. And I don't know what way it would go. It's just speculation, but one suspects that you can imagine him going too far and getting chucked off YouTube. You can imagine all kinds. How would he react to the pandemic? All kinds of things like that. But we'll never. So I think I don't think he would. It's questionable whether he would be a kind of base Jordan Peterson had he lived.
Yes,
it's the fact. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's good that he died at 49. It's not. It's tragic, obviously. But I think it is a big part of what has cemented his charisma, combined with the fact that he died at just that point where you have this young generation of people that were only children or whatever when he died, that are then exposed. He's so memeable, as you have done yourselves. He's so memeable. He's so that it spreads. To make a hyperbolic comparison, like the stories about Jesus or something, it spreads. If Jesus hadn't been crucified at 30, would he be as charismatic?
Yeah.
No.
Would Mishima be the man he is without what he did? No, probably
no,
not.
Certainly not.
On a slightly different topic of conversation, though, in reading the book and basically seeing you describe a man who I think in many ways is actually in conflict with himself. I'm reminded of a bit from Nicolas de Gomez Davila that I picked out the other week and sent to someone. Nobody finds himself by searching merely for himself. Personality is born out of conflict with a norm. Now, I think in a bizarre way, that might as well have been a statement written about Bowden. And without making it too personal for my own regards, I really appreciate him more in a certain respect, knowing that he wasn't the prototypical right-winger. He was not the ideal that even he aspired to. And for myself, it's quite sort of, I don't know, encouraging almost that someone could garner that level of prominence and be personally known, at least on some level, as someone who has these sort of conflicts within themselves and is opposed at maybe their own lifestyle or just the manner that they compose themselves to maybe the views that they espouse. But this doesn't.
Well, some people would call that a hypocrite.
Yes, but
I think that it's key. It's key to and I look at this in the book in some detail. It's key to understanding charisma, because yes, he has produced with the speeches and so on this spellbinding oratorical charisma. And what produces that? What is it that allows you to have the self-confidence to do that? What is it that allows you to go into almost a trance-like state, which then brings the audience into a trance-like state, such that you can turn the tears and turn the laughter and all this kind of thing? What is it that allows you to have the verbal dexterity to make all of these witty remarks and all this kind of thing? It's this optimally balanced bundle of traits, which can be summarized to some extent as sort of narcissism, really, as a kind of not necessarily borderline narcissistic personality disorder, but certainly as subclinical narcissism, which itself does relate, because it's a response to high neuroticism and stress, to developing paranoid schizophrenia, not schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, and so. You can, and then what is it that narcissists are prone to? Well, they're prone to lying, and they're prone to exaggerating, and they're prone to self-aggrandizement, and they're prone to, and then of course the nature of the genius is such that you often have outlier high intelligence, which makes you crap at things that because of the Spearman's law of diminishing returns, that are at the base of the intelligence pyramid, that are perfectly fine for ordinary people, like driving a car or being able to make money or whatever. And so you can see how therefore it's this ironically the very people that inspire the foot soldiers will almost certainly be highly flawed, and in that sense hypocrites, or in that sense in conflict with themselves. So we really, as I try to stress to these people that want to say, oh, you're just slagging off Bowden. No, that is the nature of the charismatic. If Bowden is a charismatic, amazing chap, which he is, it seems to me that he is on a number of levels, then you would expect him concomitantly, or indeed just as part of that, to be deeply, deeply flawed, and as you say, in conflict with himself, to be basically highly mentally unstable, essentially.
Yes, I think if he was a 6'2" scrum half, who could run a Bitcoin trading platform and be a successful multi-billionaire, he wouldn't be Jonathan Bowden.
Yeah, and had a family, and actually did have a family.
Yes, he would be something else. And that is what I think you're trying to get across, is that you've got to take it all as one.
Somebody was saying to me today, a chap I correspond with, and he was on my channel, an interesting guy, and he was saying, who do you think is anybody that you can compare in the modern world to Jonathan Bowden? Do you think Nima Parvini is the new Jonathan Bowden, he said. And I said, well, no. And also some people have remarked that I'm a bit like Jonathan Bowden in some respects. I don't know why they think that, but anyway. No. We're much more normal and adaptive. You know, me and Nima, we're married and have kids and a house and stuff. I mean, we're quite. That's what Bowden's not about. Bowden's not about that. Bowden lived in a caravan that was falling apart and had absolutely no money and never worked and never had a relationship and never had kids and had a fantasy marriage with 5 children. So if you're going to talk about a new Jonathan Bowden, they have to be rather more like that. I mean, really, really peculiar and a failure in a lot of areas of life, but a great success in one very narrow one.